musician today. She's here from Dallas, Texas. Please welcome Robin Hackett.
This is your moment. This is your moment. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Absolutely fabulous. And you have CDs out in the lobby, right? And a sassy book, too. She has a sassy book. Sassy. You want to tell them what it is?
It's called Girl, You're a Grown-Ass Woman.
Now, I couldn't say that. But she can. It's her book. So I want to just take a moment. I found out that the Center for Spiritual Living in Bitterroot Valley in Montana has been watching these Sunday programs every Friday. So hello. And that's Reverend Dave Schultz and Selma. Selma calls us and tells us things. So I just isn't this great? They're with us. And so let's just right now, since we're thinking about what's east of us, let's just take a moment. And Joel, would you go back over there? You know that wonderful song, I Send My Love Over the Mountains? Come on, let's do it. I want you to just allow the presence and power of love of God. Because you know what? Jesus said that if we had enough faith, we could move mountains. So let that love, let that faith well up inside of us. And let us send not just our love, but our cool thoughts over the mountains. And let our love shower down upon those who have lost their homes or in fear of losing their homes. Let us surround them with our love and let love show up somehow. Let love manifest itself as the help and the healing and the support that they need. Let our love show up and soothe and strengthen and nurture and heal those who are fighting the fires. Breathe in the love of the universe and breathe it out back into this earth and over this earth and over the mountains and through the woods. To Bitterroot we go, our grandma's house. Thank you, sweet Spirit, that we may come together and use our faith for good. And I know that someone right now is feeling the effects of these prayers. They are feeling the effects of us sending love and knowing love right where they are, and they feel it in a way that is tangible and real. And so it is. That's what a house manager has to do. Okay. Well, that's the happiest part of the talk so far. So I will need to tell you a little bit about my process about doing a talk. What happens is I make a commitment to start to sit in my prayer chair and listen. I start about 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon until it happens. I'm always waiting for it to happen earlier. And I will tell people I will go do this Saturday event if I get my talk done. And usually, the talk comes when it comes. It's like pregnancy. You have a date, but the baby comes when it comes, right? And so I'm waiting, and yet the talk comes when it comes, and then it just comes all at once. And I just take notes. And I'm taking notes and going, this is a downer, God. This is a downer. Are you sure? Because I want to talk, I want to finish up this whole thing about recovery, and that we're all in recovery. And what we're recovering is our innocence. We're recovering that spiritual essence of ourselves, and it's been covered up by a lot of things. It's been covered up by our sense of guilt. It's covered up by our sense of shame. It's covered up by what we've been told about our worthiness or acceptability or our significance. And yet, the recovery is the uncovering of our original goodness. And so I close this series with talking about recovering from addiction. And I know that most of you probably don't have name brand addictions. You wouldn't necessarily call yourself an addict. You wouldn't necessarily call yourself a gambler or an overspender or any of those things that people can be addicted to and that they have groups for. But I also believe that many of us have processes or habits or reactions that we're powerless over. How many of you know you have a few of those? It's like something happens, whoop, and it's just you're powerless. Well, I hope today's talk helps us recover our original freedom, because in that original innocence is original freedom. And we can all be freer. I was very much inspired by this book, Soul Recovery, by Esther Nicholson. So she started the series, and I'm finishing it up today. And by the way, there's 6 of these left in the bookstore the last time I looked. It's an amazing story. She has an amazing story of recovery. And it's not just from something, but it's the uncovering of all of her divinity again. So I want to look at addiction in 3 ways. 2 of them are things that I was told or studied, and the other thing is something I came up with on my own after reading this book and just looking at myself and my friends and others who might be affected by some sort of addiction, whether it's a name brand addiction or it's just a private hell. Because when we lose our freedom, that is hell. We don't have to go there. We can sometimes visit it any time. So here's the first look at addiction, and this is taught by Ernest Holmes. Who's the founder of our philosophy, and he said that addiction is the result of an emptiness that only spirit can fill. So we are empty, and we try to fill it with processes or substance, but it's only going to be filled with spirit, truly. I mean, eventually it is only some sort of, not necessarily God, but some sort of spiritual connection. There is that essence of our true self is what will fill us. It's been said that there's in all of us a God-shaped hole. I don't know who said that. I wish I could quote them, but Sigmund Freud. Well, really? No wonder I forgot his name. Sounds so Jungian. But thank you, Kathy, who never misses a trick. Anyway, so I had heard that, and I must admit that maybe that's because I'd heard that, and that's what I had been taught in ministerial school. Maybe it's why I really paid attention to a story that came out maybe 20 years ago. And I remember it because it fit my belief system, which is what we all do, right? If you have a belief, you will have evidence, honestly. If you don't think you're okay and insignificant, you will have evidence that you're not okay and insignificant. If you start to believe that I am okay and I'm significant, you'll start to have evidence that you are okay and you are significant. So that's just the way it happens. So about 20 years, I read about a study that happened among Native North American tribes, in some Native North American tribes. And I say North American because it happened in Canada. And I don't know much about this, but I was under the impression that Native Americans, or indigenous people to this continent, had a harder time with alcoholism than other people. And I was told that it was because they weren't used to that substance, alcohol, and therefore susceptible to becoming physically addicted to it. That's what I was told. And it made such great sense. And I remember being told that there's certain cultures, I'm looking at Ray Rebello, who's Portuguese like my husband, Tim Lorenzo. If you have an O on the end of your name, you look Portuguese. No, not really. But certain cultures and countries that were raised drinking wine weren't as susceptible to alcoholism. That's what I had heard. And so, therefore, cultures that had never had alcohol in their history were more susceptible. That's what I'd heard. Well, somebody actually decided to test it. God bless them. And what they did is that they reintroduced the spirituality that the tribes had practiced before they were shamed out of that spirituality. before it was taken from them. And they said, no, you got to be Christian and go to this church. Now, I'm not saying Christianity is bad, but it wasn't what they were native. That's not what was native to them. So they were taken from one belief system, their way of connecting with something greater than themselves, and removed from it. And the tribe became susceptible to alcoholism. When the old teachings were reintroduced, alcoholism decreased. They just didn't want to drink. Interesting. Maybe Ernest was right. Maybe it's the spirituality, not church, not religion. See, anyone outside would say, but they're going to church. No. How do you connect to your spirit? That's why one of the things we say is that we honor all paths to God. However you connect to your greater essence, man, that's a good way. If you're connecting to your greater essence, yahoo! Another thought about addiction, and this comes from the Huntington Post, recent study published in the Huntington Post. I'm not going to go into too much detail because you can Google it. Address the idea that addictions happen because of chemical reactions and that we become chemically set up to want those drugs again, specifically drugs. In fact, I guess the idea was what makes you addicted to drugs is drugs. If you take a drug long enough, you're going to want that drug. Well, somebody decided to test it. And one of the ways that they prove that if you are introduced to that drug, you're going to want that drug, is they use rats. Really. And so there are studies. They showed these rats, little rats in a cage, and 2 bottles. One bottle's regular water, and one bottle is infused with cocaine. Guess what? The rat starts to like the cocaine. And that's all he drinks is the water with the cocaine until he finally dies. Proves it. Drugs make you an addict. Well, somebody started to expand upon this idea, and they created rat heaven. A rat's version of heaven. Clean, lots of friends to play with, their own individual little cages, but this central area where they could come and play and talk and kibitz. All the food they wanted, so the introverts could go away by themselves and the extroverts could come out and talk. Toys. And they were also given 2 bottles of water. Regular water and cocaine water. They tasted the cocaine water. But they didn't drink it a lot. They drank the other water. In fact, what they found is that if they take cocaine-addicted rat over here, who's by himself, and put him in rat heaven, he stops drinking the cocaine water. The study goes on and on and on and on, but what the conclusion was is that people often become addicted because what they really want is connection. And if they don't get the connection, they smother that sense of loneliness with something that they're addicted to. More evidence came out of just studying what happened to our own soldiers in the Vietnam War. Because the war was so horrendous, while they were there, it was estimated that at least 20% of the soldiers there were using large doses of heroin to get through the day. 20%. And it was foretold that there'd be a huge epidemic of heroin addicts when they went back to the States. But they went back to the States, went back to their family, went back to their friends, and out of that 20%, only 5% had a drug problem. They got connected. So one study says that it's our spirit that fills us up to the place that we don't need to use substances or processes to make ourselves feel better. There's another study that says it's connection that allows us to feel good about ourselves and not need to use processes or substances to fill ourselves up. But if you think about it, connection is love, and love is the highest name for God. So it's still back to God. I could have done a talk on either one of those things, and yet I've been looking deeper at it, deeper in myself and other people that I know with addictions. Whether it is a name brand addiction or something else, a brand name addiction, I should say, or something else. And this is what I have come to believe, is we get addicted to something that relieves and alleviates our suffering. If we can't stand suffering, we will look for something to smother the suffering with or to zone out with. And suffering can come up like emptiness, loneliness, unworthiness, failure, no sense of direction. And when we try to mask that suffering, we do it with a substance or an activity. We mask it. It doesn't go away, but we mask it. Or we fix it. We fix what's making us suffer. And then we become addicted to fixing, usually ourselves. It'd all be better if I was different. How many of you know people, certainly not anyone here in this room, but you know people who got addicted to fixing themselves? Nobody knows anybody? Just the two of you know those people. You should talk. You might know the same people. But we get addicted to fixing because the suffering is so awful. Well, Spirit will alleviate that suffering, but you know what? What I thought was it could alleviate that suffering, but what if we could grow through the suffering so that we don't suffer? No, there's only one way out, and it would be through it. And I was really inspired by this, I think, I'm not sure. It all happened at one time yesterday. But I was recalling someone who used to go to this church, and I saw on Facebook that they had committed suicide. And what I realize is that sometimes people even will use God or church to relieve suffering, but if we're only going for relief, we can get short-term relief, but the terms get shorter and shorter and shorter. There's no healing. There's just short-term relief. And so I'm putting this out there because my prayer is that if this is true, if what I have to say is true, that it will be planted within the souls of all of us, and we will look at suffering a different way. Not as a victim to it or of it, but that we can be the master of it. So how do we become the master of this thing called suffering? And by the way, did you notice that the world there's suffering's going to happen, right? We can't put above the door, come here and you'll never suffer again. And if you saw that, please let us know so we can take that down. But I'm sometimes amazed that people will show up and leave because their life isn't going well. This is what I believe. This is the total of me. Life goes better with God. Life goes better with your understanding of God. I don't mean the God, the way I practice God. I mean God, something, that spiritual essence. So whether you do it through a Native American tradition or you're a Hindu or whatever it is, life goes better with God, but it doesn't mean that life doesn't go. So I have gone through so many things, and I was grateful I had my God to lean into. And I've had mountaintop experiences. I'm so grateful that God said, oh, guess what? You think that's a good thing? Wait till next time. Life goes better with God, and we still have to go through stuff, which is, by the way, the essence of the word suffer. Suffer at its origin just meant to undergo. Just that's all it meant, to undergo. Listen to the word, go. Undergo. Meaning, I'm not going to be stuck here forever. It's not understuck. It's undergo. And we all have things we will undergo. I feel like I could do yoga now. Undergo. That's amazing what God will do for you, just to keep you awake. So how do we undergo this thing? First of all, at the deepest level, we don't avoid the suffering. Don't avoid it. Know you're going to do it. Know you are doing it. And knowing that masking it will not solve it. Masking it will only temporarily relieve you, but guess what? It'll come back bigger. Addiction will cause more suffering, no matter what kind of addiction it is. If you are shopping to relieve your pain, the bills still show up. And then you've got your pain and the bills. If you're not avoiding the suffering, what do? You say what's going on for you. If you're lonely, say I'm lonely and feel it. If you want to cry, cry. And I truly suggest, and this is so biblical. This is so wonderfully Old Testament. Stomp your feet and cuss at God if you need to. Do it. Get mad. I'm lonely, you blah, 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 blah. Fill in your favorite words. It's like God can take it. You got to let it out. To hold it in is poison. Let it out and let the thing that can handle it have it. Stomp your feet, say you're ticked. I used another word first service, but now we're being recorded. And demand some action. Truly. How many of you you've got to be a good little soldier before you can go to God and do your prayers? No. Be real. Be original. Be yourself. That self is perfect, just as it is. And if you're willing to feel it, you'll go through it. Undergo. Then, tell a trusted friend or friends what is paining you. And when I say trusted, I mean trusted. Don't share it with just anybody. If you've got something really, really awful going on, don't just share it with anybody. They're going to believe it. Share it with somebody that will listen to you, have compassion for where you are, but know that you're going through it. When I have bad stuff happen, there's a few people that I trust that I can share my condition with, because I know that they will not see this as a reality of me. They will see it as something that I'm going through. That's why we train prayer practitioners, so that they can listen to you and not buy into your story. They'll nod their head and they'll be sympathetic. Yeah. And the back of no, I don't believe a word of it. Why? Because where two or more are in agreement, it shall be established on earth. I don't want my stuff to be established. I want it to be a drive-by. So you monitor who you share with. At least that's what I do. You can do whatever you want. Try it both ways. See what the results are. You have to prove this for yourself. After you have acknowledged the suffering to yourself, to God, and to another, then pray to God and have the other person pray with you that you become stronger. There's a beautiful song out it's an old song. It was one of Ricky Byers' first songs, and she's now Ricky Byers Beckwith, but when she was still Ricky Byers, she wrote this song that says, God, make me stronger. I'm going through this. God, make me stronger. God, give me confidence. God, don't let me succumb. Make me more patient as I do this. Let me learn from this. Ram Dass said, suffering is part of our training program for reclaiming our wisdom. It's a training program for reclaiming our wisdom. Otherwise, we would have even more addicts in the world. Something happens, we dummy down. Something happens, we dummy down. I mean, isn't that why a lot of our nation, we don't want to look around, so we watch more TV, become more involved with video games? We're avoiding because we don't know we can handle it. If we can't handle it, then let God in you handle it. We haven't even tapped into our innate spiritual power. And we won't as long as we're trying to just be comfortable. It's this, I have this class that I'm now going to teach it to ministers. And it's my class. It's what I learned from. And it's called What Would Jesus Do? And what I'm getting from that, studying the Gospel of John, is that the Christ that acted through the man Jesus could go anywhere. That's why he went into taverns. And he could look at anything, and that's why he could heal lepers. He could do, because the Christ isn't afraid. So I'm either coming from my small self or my Christed self. And so by looking at suffering in the eye, then I either have the opportunity to stay where I am or be lifted up and filled up. That's an opportunity. That's what Ram Dass is saying. This is a growth opportunity. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but it's not going to be near as hard as we make it. How many of you have done things that you dreaded, and once you did it, you went, boy, I made a big deal about that one. When we learn to look at the heart of the matter, we begin to master our heart. And so we don't deny it. We let God to fill us in the midst of it, whatever this suffering might be and the condition that makes us suffer. And then we become more and more filled with light. And by light I mean understanding and wisdom and acceptance and love. And shadows don't scare us anymore. And maybe nothing will change, but it will be nothing to us. So they don't like me. So I messed up again. So I'm not married. I'm still okay. It's the same thing, but it's not us. I find this Eckhart Tolle quote. He was asked if suffering is really necessary, and he said, yes and no. If you had not suffered as you have, you would not be asking this question. But it made you more compassionate. Suffering cracks open the shell of ego. And then there comes a point when it has served its purpose, which is to crack you open, and suffering becomes unnecessary, and you don't have to do it again. Once we become so open, we're so filled with light, we go, oh, they don't like me. Oh, I have a pain. We can have pain. It was the Buddha who said, pain is normal, suffering is optional. You have a pain in your heart, your mind, your body. We undergo it. We just undergo it, or we hold it. The last thing that I want to share is, I forgot who said this, but probably Kathy Galvin will know. Suffering is one of life's greatest teachers. But if we avoid it, we may succumb to something worse than suffering, which is addiction. And then we've lost our freedom. I reserved some time here for questions and prayer requests because I knew that this was, not your usual cheerful, it's all good talk, although it is all good. So is there any prayer requests out of this, or any question, or how do I apply this? Anything that anyone would like to? Yes, would you pass that down, honey?
Thank you. I'm just praying that things will shift for the better, because things are shifting really good.
So you want to
making changes in my life, and I'm just praying that things will shift the way they're supposed to.
Oh, they will. He wants to make sure that they shift the way they're supposed to, and they will. And the way so how about that things shift for your blessing and the benefit of everyone around you? Because I'll just say this right now. Reverend Sharon's going to do a talk at 1 o'clock, and it's part of the Power Talks, and it's about the 12 powers of man and our own innate power. And we have a power called will, which is the ability to choose and then focus. And sometimes we choose, but it doesn't go right, and we go, oh, I guess that's God's will. No, God's will is for your good and your blessing. Does that make sense? So to stay focused there, we stay as we look on a trajectory, and we go through what it takes to get there. So I will keep for you, who would like to have their life shift for their blessing and the benefit of everybody else? Well, then there we go. That's why it's great to have prayer requests, because they're really good. I mean, thank you. We all want that. Anyone else have a comment, a question, or a prayer request? Oh, your birthday. Look at this birthday outfit. I mean.
I have two sons. My oldest son is recovering from addiction, and he's a member of very conservative Baptist church. But my other son, younger, is an atheist, and sometimes I don't know how to respond or support them on spiritual level. So I would ask to give them spirit to lead them in the way.
Thank you. So here's the great news. So you want to know a little trick? This is very high metaphysics, by the way. High metaphysics. Never, ever, ever try to shift or change anyone. But you can write to their angel, because everybody has the presence of God that operates through them. And this comes out of Revelations, and nobody would show up for a talk on Revelations. So I'm just going to give you I'm going to give you the Reader's Digest version of this, which is that you can write a letter to their highest self, because we all have a highest self. Did you know that? I mean, we all do. Whether you're an atheist or even Baptists have highest selves. I mean it, really. Everybody, Baptists, anything, have a higher self. And what that higher self is the best part of them. And you all know you have that, right? You all know that you're run by a committee. I mean, that movie Inside Out, go look at it. I haven't seen it, but it's the truth. We're all run by committee. And there is the part of us that always knows our own goodness and the goodness of others. So just write to the goodness. And in Revelation, it's called the angel. So you just write to an angel. Can I use you? So it'd be Melinda. Melinda, I know that the highest part of you remembers who you are, and it's really, I just celebrate that and know that you are doing wonderfully. And get the book that Mae McCarthy wrote, because she's been using that to shift everything in her business, and by just writing to the angels of people who were against her in business. You just write to the angels. So it doesn't matter what they believe. You don't say anything. Now, it may be that there'll be a time when something will just come out of you and you have to trust it. But we never ever go in thinking, I'm gonna share, because I can. Ooh, how many of you like those kind of conversations? So we never do that. So you just pray and write a letter, and we're going to move into prayer now, and we're going to pray for a blessing in our own life that benefits everyone around us. Does that work for you? Okay, so let's take a deep breath. And thank you, both of you, for sharing. That's really brave. Because everything, you know what I want to say? I love it. I've never heard anyone share anything that didn't strike a chord in someone else. So every time someone shares, it's such a gift to all of us. Thank you. So let's just move into the awareness that God is present. Your version of God, what you think God is. For me, it's life itself, it's love, it's light. Lift your awareness to capture a glimpse of the knowable unknown. It's unknown because it's so vast and so immense, and yet there's a part of us that can know it and know it intimately. So we just turn our attention to that. And in so doing, it meets us. And I'd like you to just breathe into that knowable unknown and let it speak to you and tell you what you need to hear. And from this place of deep listening, I speak my word that each and every one of us are receiving messages that we need from the source of all wisdom, from the original teacher. And I give thanks that each and every one of us are receiving a blessing that is so personalized that we can't avoid it. It is so real that we can't discount it. We are receiving a blessing that enriches our life and blesses everyone around us. And I give thanks that we are, in this moment, filling up with an awareness of spirit. And so that we go through the rest of this day full and overflowing. And I give thanks that we are encouraged to see the truth, the reality, the goodness of everyone around us, whether they're a relative or they're not. And we pray for their blessing, and we pray for their benefit. I am so grateful that we become epicenters of peace in our family, in our neighborhoods, in our city, our state, and our world. I give thanks that the words of St. Francis become emblazed upon our heart. Father, make me an instrument of thy peace. And we might add, of thy blessings, of thy fullness, of thy good. Add anything you want to this prayer right now. Feel that it is done. And now with me, let it go. And let God be God. Let God do the work. It knows how. And let's together say, and so it is.
Suspend all disbelief and just breathe. You might be surprised what you will see, 'cause anything is possible. Everything's right here. Anything is possible. It's perfect and it's real. You hold your destiny in your hand. It's time you realize and take a stand, 'cause anything is possible. Everything's right here. Anything is possible. It's perfect and it's real. If you just believe, if you just believe, anything is possible. Anything is possible. So hold the vision in your heart, 'cause there's no better place for you to start. 'Cause anything is possible. Everything's right here. Anything is possible. It's perfect and it's real. If you just believe, if you just believe, anything Thank you. Thank you to this band. You guys are fabulous. Thank you. Thank you, Beverly. Thank you. Thank you.